this, which was something I had absolutely no idea I was going to get into. I was in a estate agency, and I ran the lettings business for Milbury's estate agents at the top of the high street. And I worked there for about 30 odd years and loved it, absolutely loved it. And then I don't know why exactly, but I suspect it's probably something to do with computerisation and having to do everything online and not having the one-on-one contact that is the bit that I like the most. I woke up one morning and I just thought, I can't do this anymore. If I go to one more house on a final inspection and the tenant tells me that the oven was like that when they moved in, I will probably murder them. So I thought, right, it's time to change. And it actually got so bad that I left not knowing at all what I was going to do next. And it took a couple of months for me to kind of sort of gather my thoughts. And whilst I was trying to decide what to do, I started dabbling in painting furniture at home. I'd always been very interested in furniture design and was always reasonably artistic. So at the time there was a guy working at Milbury's who used to do property maintenance, and he'd had a shop, I think it was a dog grooming shop in Wootton-under-Edge, and it hadn't really worked out, and he'd cleared it completely. And when I said to him, look, you know, I've got this stuff and it's mounting up and I don't really know what to do with the stuff once I've painted it, he said, well, why don't you put it into the shop in Wootton-under-Edge and just put a big note on the door and just say, furniture for sale, contact, and your details. So I did, and that's how it started. And quite quickly, I was getting quite a lot of inquiries from people sort of saying, well, how much is that table, how much is that chair, blah, blah, blah. And the long, tall and short of that was that he and I decided to reopen the doors, and he got very enthusiastic about painting furniture, and we agreed that we would pay half the rent each, which gave me a little bit of a soft launch into it. And he'd be at home painting furniture, and so was I, and I was going off to auctions and flea markets and things and buying lots of objet d'art, things that I could sort of dress the bits of furniture with. And being fairly sort of interested in interior design and decor and stuff, I painted the shop up nicely and did lovely window displays. And before I knew it, FIFI'S Fancy Furniture was born. And in case you think that's a weird name, it is a weird name. And my niece came up with it way before we'd actually decided what we were going to call ourselves. And by the time we'd actually started the business, we couldn't think of anything else, so it became FIFI'S Fancy Furniture. But in actual fact, it worked out quite well because the alliteration sticks in people's minds. And the paint that I sell is called Frenchic, and they have a fan forum. And if you're at all interested by anything I've said during the course of this evening, I would urge you to join the Frenchic fan forum on Facebook. And I remember the founder phoned me and saying, this is going to be great fun, FIFI'S Fancy Furniture at the Frenchic fan forum. So, having spent a year sharing a shop with my friend, it became obvious that we were going to be a bit of a thing, not like him and me, but the business. And my sister sort of came on board to help me. She was very much interested in trying to grow it from a social media point of view. And she was the person who held the purse strings. And I can remember now, I don't even know how we did it really, I can remember I had £1,000 in my bank account when I left Milbury's. And that's what I started the business with. And from that I had to pay the rent, buy materials, do the insurance, and everything that's associated with starting a business. So we started, and at the end of each month she would say to me, right, well, we've done quite well this month, you've got £230 that you can spend on stock. And when I look back, I don't know how I did it. And I used to go to markets and I'd see things, and they were always just over the budget, and I used to think, God, if I could get that, I just know I could make money on it. But we were business partners, that was the deal, and I had to honour it. So the business grew very slowly, but it had roots. I didn't have any overdrafts, I didn't have any credit cards, and didn't have any debts. And gradually, it's grown. And after a year, we had to move to a different shop, and my sister's husband's business really took off, and she was needed more with him than she was with me. So we divorced in the nicest possible way. But she still now sort of comes in every Friday morning and she films us doing a live in our shop. By live, we used to do Facebook Live until we got hacked. Now I've got 4,500 followers on Facebook that I can't actually get to, which is really annoying. So we do a live now on our YouTube channel. So if anybody's interested in subscribing, I would love it if you did, and then you'll get a little Friday morning to say, we're about to go live, and for about 20 minutes, we walk around the shop and show you what's new in, and in new paints and in new products, etc. So the second shop was bigger than the first. It was our own shop, and we were able to do all sorts of nice things in there, including running courses. But after 2 years, the business was sold to somebody else, the premises, and we had to find another shop. And there'd been a shop at the top of the high street that I walked past every day from the car park, and it was empty for 3 or 4 years before we took it on. And every day I stood through the window and think, I wonder. And it felt that it was huge, and I just was really, really scared. But I had to find something. So I approached them, and long story short of it was, we got the lease, we signed up for 5 years. I've done 4.5 years in that shop, and I've been trading now with an underage for nearly 8 years. And that all started because the tenants gave me a load of gyps. So it's funny how things work out. And now I can't really imagine doing anything else. I love what I do. The business has grown. I mean, we're not massive, but we're a nice, strong little business. I could do with it being without sort of penalties on mortgages and things at the moment. That would obviously help. But whilst we'd been in our first shop, we took on the Frenchic Paint franchise, effectively. It's our business, but we just buy it all in, and she only sells the paint to independent retailers. There's nothing done through B&Q or anything like that. And to start with, I used to think that the paint was the sprat to catch the mackerel. If we could get people in to buy the paint, then we would sell objet d'art and furniture on the back of it. And the paint sales have been astronomical. She started from scratch like we did 8 years ago, a Yorkshire lady, and developed the paint along with a chemist. She used chalk paint. At the time, you might know the name Annie Sloan. And the Annie Sloan paint was really the starting chalk paint company. And I've got nothing bad to say about Annie Sloan paint. I used to sell it in a previous life and demonstrate in it. But it didn't really move on with the times from an economic and from an ecology point of view. So Pammy developed this paint and started from absolutely nothing, and 8 years on, it's now the world's leading chalk paint, and it's for sale all over the world. In fact, she's just sold the company now, and the chemist who developed the paint with her has taken it on because he has factories and outlets all through Europe, and he can really push the sales some more. So she's now sunning herself on the most fantastic yacht in New York. But she still comes in on my lives most Friday mornings to ask me what VOCs stand for, because I could never remember, but it is actually volatile organic compounds. What exactly they are, I don't really know. But it's good not to have many of them, and all her paints have no VOCs. They're all certified safe for children and for pets, and they do exactly what they say on the tin. There's really good coverage and beautiful colours, long lasting, and it's some exciting paints to use. I've never known anybody who hasn't sort of done a project and been really impressed by it. So, what to tell you? If I brought along some samples of things, it would be very easy to sort of pretty much bring along the whole shop, but I thought to maybe incentivise you all, if at the end of it you have been enthused and you want to try any of the products, up until the end of the month, you can have a 10% discount on anything in the shop, including the paints. So if you want to try them, now's a good time to do it. I think one of the earliest things that I did, and I think this is probably something people might sort of identify with, you don't get many more boring chairs, really, than this one. I mean, you know, it's beige drayon, it's brown, and it's pretty dull. So I decided to just put some masking tape down the middle of it and show what can happen if you decide to paint and modify it. So this is fabric, and I've painted the fabric as well. And because this is draylon, like a sort of velvet pile, you get this slightly sort of cracked effect, but it doesn't come off on your clothes, and it's really, really tough, hard wearing. This goes to all my demonstrations and meetings and things with me. I probably painted it 5 years ago, and there's a couple of little marks on it, but really not very much at all. And this was painted using the original chalk paint that she invented. And by the original chalk paint, I mean that this one is one that you have to varnish or wax to finish it. So I start by just washing any furniture that I'm going to paint, whether it's indoors or outdoors, with sugar soap. And then I give it all a light sand, wipe off the dust, and then put the paint on. And with this particular chair, this was 2 coats. And once I'd done it, I then waxed it using some clear wax and a wax brush. And when you're painting fabric, if you're painting your leather sofa or leather chair, or if you paint something that's got linen colours on it, like dining chairs for example, it actually looks like a smooth leatherette. It's really, really nice. And to do that, you just spray your fabric first with a spray gun, just to give it a bit of a dampening. Then put your coat of paint on. When it's dry, you use a wax brush, and I tend to use mine a bit like a stabber, and I put it into the wax, and you really, really work it into the pile and into the wood. You wipe off the excess, and when that's dry, you do the same procedure again. So it's paint wax, paint wax, paint wax, and you finish with the top layer of wax. So I actually thought that this chair...
You paint over the wax?
Pardon?
So you paint over the wax?
On the fabric you do, yeah. Not on the wood,
Right.
but on the fabric you do. You're just sort of building up the colour and building up the texture of it.
Wax.
Yeah. And then I did a couple of little stencils using some of our gold powders, which I'll come on to a little bit later. I love stenciling. It's a nice way of decorating something, and I do think sometimes that less is more, but it's a really nice way of just lifting something. So that was using Mother Duck from the original range, and I brought along the sets of spoons so that you can get an idea of all the different colours. In the original range, they call this the artisan range, because if you're doing things like the French chippy look, or if you're trying to build up layers of paint, then the artisan range is really, really good to use, and you can use sandpaper with it, and bring the wood through and do the distressed finish, etc. So I love the original range. Most people, when I tell them about the other ranges, say, oh, that's the one I'm going to use, I'm going to use that one, and they forget how marvellous these are. So I'll come on to those a bit later. After she developed those, she then came on to develop the lazy range, which, as its name suggests, cuts out the waxing process. So with the lazy range, you don't need to wax them. They're self-priming, they're self-leveling, so you don't get brush marks, and you can seal them using wax. The normal procedure is to use a clear wax, but they do actually have coloured waxes, which I'll show you later. If you only use the waxes on these if you're wanting to create a different type of effect. So if you're wanting to add a bit of age, you would add some brownie wax, which will give it a sort of an antique appearance. So the lovely colours in the lazy range, nice and quick and easy, same preparation, 2 coats, job done. Start using it the same day. Then a bit later on, she invented the Fresco range, which, as its name suggests, is designed for outside. So anything that's metal, wooden sheds, fences, concrete paths, plastic bins, the big wheelie bins, UPVC front doors, etc. This is a weatherproof paint. Same preparation, and once you've painted it on, you don't need to seal anything. So those were the standard stable of colours which she has sort of added to over the period of the last 2 or 3 years. But as is her way, she keeps on adding in beautiful sort of limited edition colours, which have usually got a nice pop of colour. And you'll see front doors. Now that you've heard about Frenchic, you'll see it on the TV, you'll see it in magazines, you'll start spotting the colours on people's front doors. So those are those. And then she's just recently brought out, like within the last month or so, a whole range of limited edition colours in the Fresco. So these can all be painted on your front door if you want to, or during lockdown, we weren't so much selling paint by the tin, it was more like paint by the ton. Everybody was in the garden, that lovely weather, painting their concrete paths and stenciling them. People were really, really creative. So these are the lovely new colours that have just come out. I thought I'd pick this one just to show you. We had a little works experience lady in with us last week. She was 15. She was enthusiastic, she was willing, she was lovely actually. She really gave me a lift, and because I was having to find things for her to do and teaching her painting effects, by the end of it I was supercharged myself. I couldn't wait to get home and carry on doing some painting. So this colour is called Matcha. This is a limited edition colour. These are £17.95 for 500 mils. And we decided that this very old plant stand, which was badly watermarked, it was quite scratched, quite damaged actually, would be a perfect candidate to paint. So we've done it, and we've left it in its plain state because we thought we'd go for the smooth contemporary look. And I thought with a lovely big green plant on that, or possibly a statue or a candle in a holder, it would be a nice little thing to have in the corner of the room. But because I was trying to teach her about different wax techniques and things, and remember this is one that doesn't have to be wax, so this would be purely because you wanted to try different techniques, we used some brownie wax on a sample board just to show you what it might look like. And if you imagine that we used the brownie wax with that wax brush and we really got in there, and we got the wax into all these little lines around here, and then you wipe it off. If you leave it quite dense, the wax, that's the sort of finish you'll get, quite dark, quite aged. It changes the whole character of the thing. Or if you put it on and then you wipe it off again more or less straight away, it changes the colour, but the wax will get caught into all these lines and it will just give you a really nice aged effect. If you wanted to go one stage further and you wanted to do some distressing, and distressing is when you rub it back through to get through to the wood to make it look even older, as if it's been banged around the back of somebody's old van for years on end, then you can use sandpaper and you can just lightly distress back around the leading edges where it would naturally get bashed, and that will give you an even nicer sort of aged look, quite a French looking thing. So that's that colourway. My favourite colour at the moment is this one, which is called Olivia. And this one's in 750ml tin. This is not a limited edition, this is one that's going to be available now in the permanent stable of the Fresco colours. And I thought it would be fun. I had a chair that came in, had a series of chairs that came in, and this one had, what do you call it when you have the little holes in it? It's not reading, it's rattan. Like rattan, it's got little holes in it. You pay by the hole to have it done. I can never remember what it's called. What's it called, Nick?
I can't remember.
By the way, this is Nick. He works with me. Sorry, he's an honorary girlie for the night. He's come along to help. I was working all day, so he came along and helped load the van and make sure I didn't forget anything. And he's my prompt most of the time, so that's why he's here. He's doing some videoing at the moment. Anyway, the seat was broken. That was the long talk short of it. So I thought, well, rather than throw the chair away, because the chair itself is still quite strong, I've painted it using the Olivia weatherproof paint. And you could find a round flower pot, a plastic flower pot, and as long as it fits in the diameter, you just drop it down in and paint it the same colour, and then you can have that in your garden. Now, as luck would have it, we had one in the shop which just happened to fit perfectly in there, and it was all lovely and rusty, which is the way I love plants is to look. And the hydrangea, which a customer gave me, just happened to be a beautiful mix of the same sorts of greens, and there's a bit of pink in there. And I have to tell you that olive green and pinks, just a great mixture. So I'm very pleased with that, and it's meant that you can upcycle old chairs and just have a go and see where you end up with it. So that was the original range, the Lazy range and the Alfresco range. Not to be outdone, she then decided to introduce the metallic range, and she's done this by producing these sorts of powders which come in little pots like this, and you have a choice. You can either mix them with the finishing coat or the tough coat, and I'll show you what those are in a minute. Mix it to the consistency of double cream, and then using one of these little brushes, you could paint some fine detail onto something. Let's say, for example, that you wanted to paint a bit of detail on a cabinet like this. This was actually done in a different process, but you could use one of these brushes and you could paint it on purely like a paint. So that was a nice extra thing to have. The other thing you could do with the powders is to mix it with the brownie wax. And if you mix it with brownie wax and you keep it in a little Tupperware container, it will keep for ages and ages and ages. And this is what I would call gilding wax. And what I've done with this one, I've mixed some of the gold powder and the silver powder to make a slightly less bright gold. The gold on its own is lovely, but it's very, very blingy. If you add a little bit of silver, it just tones it down and makes a lovely sort of antique gold. And if I just put a bit on my hand, I don't really, you probably won't see that until you come up and have a look. But I think that's a bit there that I put here. And you can literally rub it across with your finger, or you can use a little paintbrush, or you can even use a little bit of a cloth just to put it on. So if you've got something with some detail, or if you have an old mirror, and it's got slightly chipped or marked, then you can put this on with your finger and you honestly wouldn't know that it had been damaged at all. It's a really quick way of preparing things. So those were the metallic powders. She then brought out some metallic paint, and generally speaking, whenever I've tried metallic paint, it's a bit translucent and a bit wishy-washy. But I have to say that these are something else. This one's called King's Gold. She brought it out for the coronation. This was the silver platinum one, and she brought out a pink gold as well. And those paint on really nicely, 2 coats, and they cover very, very well. I often paint furniture on the inside as well. I always think it's a bit like seeing naughty underwear. You don't expect to see it, but it's nice when you do. And if you open a cabinet that's been painted on the outside and it's just dull and brown and a bit sort of smelly of gold loose rock, it's a bit off-putting. But if you open it and it's beautiful colour of gold, silver, or in fact any of these other colours, you know, painting something in a subdued colour on the outside and perhaps putting a pop of that when you open the door or the drawers is really nice. It's a nice way to finish these off. So she brought those out, and then just to make things even more sexy, she brought out some sort of creams, I guess these are really. They're pre-mixed, and if you want to have a go at stenciling, these are just the perfect consistency. They're not too runny. You can easily stencil with these, and you can put them on with a finger and or with a brush. And there's one here which I think is a lovely colour, and I've been promising myself for ages that I want to use this one, which is called Champagne Rosy, along with Nougat, which is now available in the Lazy range, so it's self-priming, self-levelling and self-waxing. And I thought if I had a dressing table and I paint it with this beautiful slurred pink, and I use this, which is almost exactly the same colour, but it's just got a different sheen to it, it would make a very classy dressing table. I just don't have a dressing table, but I do. It's in my head. That's what I want to do. So that was the paint ranges. Then she decided to introduce wall colours, and she has won all sorts of awards for her wall colours. And what she's cleverly done is she's put the samples into little sachets like this. She's produced 150 colours. We have a board at the shop with a whole rack of the 150 colours. These are 95p each, and it's just enough to paint an A4 sheet of paper, 2 coats, so you can then move it around your room to see what it looks like on different walls and different lights. And the colours are fantastic. It's won all sorts of awards for being the best dead flat matte but fully scrubbable wall paint, and it truly is fully scrubbable. So if your dog comes in and shakes and gets mud all up the wall, or if you trip up the steps and throw your coffee over the wall, or if the kids crayon on it or chalk it, you can scrub it and the marks will come off but the paint stays put, which is fairly rare for wall paints. I was extremely flattered. I almost felt like I'd been knighted because Pammy called me out when she'd invented the paints and she'd launched them all, and she said, I just thought you'd like to know that we called the paint colour after you. Oh. And so this is FIFI'S Fancy. I was so chuffed. I mean, I almost couldn't sort of speak. It was kind of like, what an accolade. But she said it was because I do the live, what you call the live broadcasts every week, and I'm always bigging up Frenchic because it's a brilliant product and I truly believe in it. And when I saw the colour, I was a little bit like, ooh, how am I going to use that? Where am I going to use that? Knowing that I would have to promote it, obviously, because with my name on it. So I took it home and I decorated my dining room with it. If anybody wants to see a picture of it on my phone later, we had our fish and chips in there tonight, and I sat around and I said, I do absolutely love this colour. It's gorgeous. It's not red, it's not pink, it's not crimson, it's not amber, but it's very, very easy on the eye. It gives you energy. And just to make it a little bit more interesting, I painted the skirting boards and the door frames and the windows with the matching trim paint. So the room is completely red. It's a bit like going into a womb. But just to break it up a little tiny bit, I masked up around the skirting boards, up around the door frames and around the windows. I did an inch of space and painted that inch of space in using a mix of these powders. I mixed the gold and the silver together with this. I painted it on, and when I took the masking tape off, you just have this gold line around the architrave and around the skirting, up around the doors. And at night time, when you've got the candles going, it just catches the light and it looks absolutely super. So if you want to have a look on my phone to see what it's like, then you can see it. So that was a bit of an excitement when we got that named after us. I'm kind of rattling through this. I thought I would just sort of show you a little bit of the things that you can do. So this is a little sample board I did, and I hope that when you come up and have a look at it later, you'll think that that looks like sort of fairly old leather. And in actual fact, it's brown paper. And the brown paper has been run under the tap, soaked for 10 minutes, scrunched, and then laid out on this canvas, using this as the glue, because this is a good glue as well as a finishing coat. And I then used some of the Frenchic products with a natural sponge and blurged it, as I call it, to make it look the colour of old leather. I did put a stencil. The stencil was rubbish. Don't look at the stencil. It was a bit wet. I was tired, and just don't look at the stencil. So that's something you can do. This one is part decoupage. Now this is where we use napkins. You can use wallpaper, and you could soak it in the bath and tear the back off, and then you've got a nice big sheet of something to do some decoupage with. But if you think chest of drawers, for example, and you've painted the bulk of it, the frame, and in between all the drawers, and you want to make it look a little bit more interesting, then decoupaging your drawer fronts can look really super, or even just decoupaging the inside. To make this one slightly more interesting, I did a crackle glaze underneath it. So when you look at this closely, you can see through the tissue, and you can see the crackle glaze underneath. And I've done a couple of stools. These are the stools I bought from IKEA. I think when I bought them, they were about £12.50 each. They're flat packed. But in actual fact, I think they're now down to about £7.50. And as you can see, a napkin pretty much fits perfectly on the top. So with this stool, I painted it all. The secret, I should say, with decoupage is to match your background colour. So as you can see, this is actually pretty much this perfect match with a colour called Sugar Puff, which is from the original range. But I did some crackle glazing on it at the top, and when you look at this closely, you can actually see the blue lines, which is the colour that I painted underneath the top coat of this cream. So once it had cracked, I then did the decoupage. And to do the decoupage, this is a 3-ply napkin. The hardest part of the whole process is finding the corner to start doing your tearing off. I'm not even going to try and do it. It drives you nearly mad. But once you've got it on, or you've got your top layer, so it's really flimsy, you hold it in place, and using a nice flat brush, I would say something a bit like this one, which is all sold through Frenchic, and using the finishing coat, you just hold your hand on it and lightly take the glue right out to the very edges. I'm not running over time, am I?
No, so just label.
Oh, that's right then. I something worried about. If I'm going on too long, just yell, alright, I'll stop. So once you put this on, it will look extremely wrinkly, and you can't believe it's ever going to turn into anything nice. You dry it with a hairdryer, you put another layer of the finishing coat on, and then the trick is to very gently sand it in little round movements with some light sandpaper, nothing too harsh, and you keep going until when you close your eyes it feels completely smooth, and then it's finished. And I sealed this one using some finishing coat because I use these in my studio. If anybody's doing any painting courses with me, I need them to sit down sometimes, and they use these stools. And they get bashed all the time, but the tops still stay very good. So this was another stool that I did. I didn't do any crackle glazing on this one. And this was the napkin. So what I'm trying to say to people is, if you fancy having a go, start looking out for your favourite napkins, and you'll see them at lovely tea shops and gift shops and things like that. And once you've found your napkin, bring it up to FIFI'S, and we'll find you the perfect matching colour for the background. The idea being that when you finish doing it, it will almost look as if you've hand painted the image onto the paint. So that's quite a clever way of doing things. What have I got down here? We sell handmade letters at the shop. We have made them to order, and I think well, they come as bare wood, and they have hangers in the back. So if you wanted to buy something for your study in your initial, or R and S or whatever it might be, we have these, and then people can take them away and paint them themselves. And this one I just decided to paint using sort of the imagery of the Union Jack.
It wouldn't work on it, obviously on a small letter because there wouldn't be enough to see of it. But once I painted it on, I then used some brownie wax to make it look a little bit more aged, a bit more scruffy. And I brownie waxed all the edges. I think I even did the back on this one as well, because I was in the mood. So you could decorate pretty much anything. Works really well on wood. I particularly like using the artisan paints because I really like creating things that look as if they've been around for a really long time. This was actually the top of an old sideboard, and the sideboard itself was completely beyond repair. But I like the shape of this, and it was very dark mahogany, pretty boring really, and quite scratched, and really not fit for much. So I decided I would paint it, giving it a very sort of French textured sort of look. Again, using all the original range, which is the artisan range. This is one that you can really build up and you can sand through. And I used our crackle glaze to help create texture. And then by adding the powders to the brownie wax, I was able to put this brownie one up, but I'm drinking like, I feel like I swallowed a fly. Anything to do with old furniture that I can paint in the French style, I absolutely love. So if people wanted to have a go at that, or if you like the French chippy look, that's an option. If you really like things smooth and contemporary, then the lazy range or the al fresco will give you something that's very smooth and straightforward, like the plant stand. I did a couple more things recently. There's something that's called raised stenciling. It's like a stencil, except that instead of just putting one layer through and peeling it off, job done, you build up the layers, and you can either use a very fine, quick setting plaster, which will do it, or you can put several layers of the same colour through and build up the paint. And that just says welcome, and then I painted it using some of our powders to give it almost like a sort of a verdigris look. And the idea is that you could almost imagine if it said solicitors on there, it might have been a plaque on a wall somewhere that had aged considerably, but it is actually a little piece of old hardboard. It's quite clever, isn't it? From a stencil point of view, if you're looking for raised stencils, this was another one. This is where I actually just built the paint up through it, and I did all of this base stuff in grey, and then I put this much darker colour over the top, and then if you rub it back with sandpaper, because it's raised, it will take the layer off the paint just to show you a little bit of the base paint colour. And I think that raised stencils actually are much nicer than flat stencils, but they just take a little bit extra time to do, but I love the effect. That was another napkin over the crackle glaze. You can really see the crackle glaze on this one. I think I painted the piece of paper, or the piece of wood rather, in black. Then I put the crackle glaze on, then I put white over the top, and where it cracks, you'll see the colour that was painted on first. So you can see the black cracks through, and then I did the decoupage napkin over the top. That was just a straightforward napkin, nothing fancy about that, no waxes, no crackle glaze, just a napkin straight on. But if you imagine that extended out to a chest of drawers, it could look really super, and then put a couple of really nice knobs on. There are a few more sort of techniques I did on the back of that one. You can come up and have a look at some today. This was probably one of my favourite ones to do. This was taken off the front of a shop building. This is just a good old plastic, naff horrible letter. And I painted it to try and make it look as close as anything like rust. And we used, again, mostly the al fresco and some of the original range, and I sponged it on with a bit of natural sponge. We then used some of these powders to just give it a little bit of a highlight, and then the magic ingredient, believe it or not, was this, paprika. And we just sprinkled some on just to give it that sort of slightly rusty look, and then when it was all ready, we put some finishing coat into a spray bottle, diluted it by about 10%, put that on the table, and sprayed it from up here somewhere so it just gently popped down onto this and sealed this. So if you wanted to do anything with rust, I happen to just love rust in real life, I mean I love it. But if you wanted to replicate rust, then we've got all the different ways of doing it. And then last but not least, these finishing coats. I've been talking about these because they crop up with just about everything. I mean, you can seal paint with them. If you were painting, let's say, some bedside tables, let's say a kitchen table, because you've got a family, it's going to be used a lot. Or if you've got an Airbnb and you've got bedside tables and people will not use coasters, they just put their glasses down on it. It's so annoying. So if you've painted your furniture and you want to really seal it, so you don't have to worry about heat or marks from glasses, then you have two options. You've got the tough coat, which will give you a really tough finish, and it's a dead flat matte. So the colour and the texture of it doesn't really appear to change at all. So it's a nice way of putting that secret safety measure onto your piece of furniture without really changing the look of it. Or if you prefer to have a slightly shinier look, then you've got the finishing coat. And the finishing coat is the one that I said you can mix all these powders with to make a paint. You can use that as your glue for your decoupage. You can seal something down with it afterwards. Great stuff. I always used to say that if I could drink this, I'm sure it would do me good. My sister used to tell me often, so I shouldn't say that. But anyway. So apart from all the other bits and pieces, like the brushes that she supplies, we have a shop full of all her products. And as you can probably tell, I'm pretty enthusiastic and excited by it all. I'll just show you the other thing that we got the little girl to do last week, the work experience lady. She was 15, bless her. We had two drawers that came out of the cabinet. We had to throw away the cabinet, it was beyond repair. We salvaged the little brass feet because they could be used again. And I took the drawers out and I thought if we paint those and if we put some crackle glaze and some decoupage napkins on the front and then put some brownie wax on them, we'll have two pretty little containers that we can put knobs in and have at the shop. And actually, I think they're really, really cute and much better than having just lobbed it into the recycling or into the skip. So I kind of just imagine that if you go home and you look around, most people have got a bit of really orange pine somewhere in their house that they've had for about 25, 35 years. And orange pine transforms beautifully, it really does. So if when you get home you have a look round and you find that in the spare room you have got one of those pieces of orange pine, it's a great piece to try out your first Frenchic go on. So if you fancy doing any of those things, then come and see me. One last little thing I'll just show you. This is called reverse imagery, and this kind of almost rough paint on the back I created by leaving the lid off the tin overnight, which made the paint slightly thicker. I kind of ladled it on really thickly and then I let it dry. And this was a little tiny picture out of a colour supplement magazine in the Sunday Times, and I thought it was cute. So I cut it out, I put finishing coat on the front of it, I put it down on my painted surface, which was now nice and dry, and I left it to completely dry. And then I got a little saucer of water, and putting my fingers in the water, you just do this, going round and round and round and round and round and round, and gradually the paper comes off and it leaves the print in place. And then I just painted this little border around it, which as you can see is dead wonky. I don't know what I was doing, must have been drinking while I was doing it. And then I waxed it with some brownie wax just to give it a little bit of age. And I don't know why exactly, but I absolutely love this little picture. So that's another thing that you can try. You can use your own photographs, you can photocopy them, and you can use those photographs to transfer your image. Takes a little bit of practice, but once you've got it, you do end up with numb fingers, but it's worth it. And then the only final thing to just say to you is that there is a process that's called dry brushing, and it's pretty much as you would imagine the name like that. You mix your powders with some finishing coat to the consistency of double cream. You pop it on a little plate or a little saucer. You just dip the edge of your brush into it, and then you wipe off the excess on kitchen roll. So to all intents and purposes, it is a dry brush. If it's too wet, it won't work. And then all you do is flick it across the top of the raised image, and this will then just make the paint stick to the high edges. And it just gives it a lovely little decoration. It's quite sort of subtle, but it's there. And I did exactly the same there using white paints.
So you can do that with anything. If you've got a little bit of a raised border, if you want to create any type of pattern, that's a nice way of doing it. I think I did the same with this one. I think I probably used some white wax on that afterwards just to see what it looked like. And this one, I love this colour combo. This is a colour called Angria, which is again in the original range. And that, I think, with gold is one of my favourite combos. And if you painted it and you wanted the colour to stay pure like that, you could finish it using the clear wax. But if you wanted to use browning wax to add a little bit of age and then put the gold over the top, I think that's a really nice combo. So, has anybody done any chalk painting of any furniture themselves?
Yeah, not with the new stuff.
Mainly using the anti-stone paints? Yeah. And have you tried any Frenchic Paint by any chance?
I'm past that phase, but I think I might go back to that.
Well, I just sort of urge you to give it a consideration, because if you have got anything that is dull and brown, and look at it and think to yourself, is it giving me any energy? Or is it just a dead piece of something that I haven't even noticed for years? And if it's one of those, perfect. Well, I hope that seeing this call has kind of given you a bit of, inspiration. Yeah, well, that's no problem at all. That would paint beautifully.
What sort of, do you have to do a lot to it?
No preparation for anything, whether you're painting something that's indoors or outdoors, is always the same. You wash it with sugar soap, or you can use these, which are sugar soap, what do you call these things, like wipes. And so you're getting rid of any inherent air grease that might be on the piece of furniture. There always is. So it's always best to do it first, otherwise if you sand first, all you're doing is just rubbing in the grot into your furniture. So clean it first. When it's dry, you give it a light sand all over using a medium grade sandpaper. You're not going to try and create a sweat, you're not going to pass out with the effort, just give it a light clean all over. Then wipe the wax off, the powder off, and then paint. It's as simple as that. The paints are absolutely beautiful coverage, they really are. If you're painting something like this, or if you're painting a chair, I always recommend, if it's not too heavy and you can turn it upside down, always start with it upside down and paint upside down first. That way, when you turn it up the right way, you'll see any bits that you've missed. You'll always need 2 coats. In some cases, you might need a 3rd. In rare cases, you might need a 4th, and it's usually if you're using white or if you're using pale cream, because those colours have less pigment in. So you might need an extra coat. And also, it depends on the colour you're painting over, because if you've got a very dark piece of furniture, it might take an extra coat. So always work on 2 coats and then eyeball it. Does it need a 3rd? Are you happy with the coverage? And if the answer is yes, it's done. And the only thing I will say to people is to be aware, once you finish painting something, you do need to leave it to have time to fully cure. All paint is soft for about 3 to 4 weeks. So you can use it, but instead of scraping the backwards and forwards on it, place them on, lift them off, and just give it time to fully harden. Once it's hardened, you can do what you like. But so don't let the dog scratch it, don't roller skate into it, don't use your jewellery on it upside down, your diamond scraping across things, just give it some time just to fully cure. But if you do all of those things with the preparation, you paint it nicely, and then you give it time to cure, you'll have something which will stay painted, well, like that chair. I mean, I bashed that chair around, you wouldn't believe. And it's still in remarkably good condition considering, and nobody would be bashing around their furniture as much as that chair gets bashed about. So that's pretty much it. If anybody's got any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer.
If you do you have to use the base coat for that tough top glaze to work? Or if you had something that was painted already and you just wanted to put that top glaze, top tough thing on it,
Yeah.
would it be tough, or is it the process?
It's tough. It's really
So,
tough.
so with the kitchen, my kitchen chairs that I've already painted fairly recently, that do get lumps and bumps out of them, if I just covered that something
Yeah, I
like
mean,
that,
it is
it was,
effectively an acrylic type varnish. It's a water-based product. Every single product she makes is water-based. Even the waxes, you can wash them out with soap and water under the tap. The only thing I would say is, it depends how long ago you painted it, because if it's in a kitchen, the products will end up with a very fine layer of.
I've only recently done them again.
I would probably say wipe them over with that first, just to make sure there's no inherent hair grease on it, and then you can put that on. I put these on if I'm varnishing something. I will either use a sponge, like one of those sponges with the green backs on it, because I find it nice and easy to go up and down like that and go across like that, make sure you've covered it. But you can use a flat brush to put it on as well. It goes on white, so you can see where you've been painting, but it dries clear. You want to make sure you've got enough on to give it coverage, but not so much that when you go back, that's some run marks on that, because the run marks will show up as run marks if you don't just eyeball it afterwards. If after the first coat you look at it and you think it looks a bit streaky, it's because you haven't put enough on. And in any case, you want to put 2 coats on. If it's something that I know is going to get a real bashing, because I'm a bit of a belt and braces sort of person, I'm selling furniture, I want to make sure that it's going to survive and be good in somebody else's house, I often use 3 coats. But it's really good stuff. If you were going to sand a piece of furniture like a tabletop back to bare wood, to just have the bare wood, then you can use this to seal it. It's really good. But because it's water and it's going on to a natural wood, when you run your hand over it afterwards, it will feel slightly rough because it raises the grain. So then use a very fine sandpaper just to knock back the raised grain, and then apply it again. And I would say probably if it's a kitchen table, like an old pine kitchen table, you might want to do it 3 times until you know that it feels completely smooth. It's then fully impregnated the wood and it's protected it. So it'll go over clear wood and it will go over paint as well. How big is your cabinet that you're going to paint, or chest of drawers?
So that it's actually like a chest of drawers, and then on the top there's a mirror with 2 drawers.
Oh yes.
So this is why the drawers have the mirror.
Okay.
But I have got a bedside table, so I want to paint the whole lot.
Yeah.
But I have never done it before. I've always sort of thought, oh no, I'm going to mess it up. But
No, I think a lot of people feel like that. And I always say, look, it's only paint.
yeah.
And it's only a couple of hours. And you just announce to the rest of the family that on Sunday afternoon, on the 16th of August, you will be doing your painting and you're going to have your favourite radio music on. You might have a cup of tea, or better still, you might have a glass of wine because it calms the nerves. And I swear to God, the time will fly by and you think, why have I done this before?
I know. Then I want to
It's
do
so
it.
enjoyable. It really is. It's my form of meditation.
Is it?
That and gardening.
Yeah.
I always find that when I'm painting, I have thoughts, but they don't attach.
Yeah.
And eventually I stand back and I think, it's really nice, and I'm really chuffed, and I think, I have so enjoyed this. I've had a clear brain, and it's been lovely.
Yeah.
And I think that's what people enjoy about it, the fact you can transform something and enjoy the process.
Yeah. And you just want to update it, don't you?
Absolutely, and I think you'll be amazed. If you're unsure about colour, and a lot of people are, you might want to stick with something fairly neutral. And if you're looking for a really nice neutral colour, there are 2 that I would recommend to you. In the Lazy range, which is the one with the wax already in it, there's a colour called Salt of the Earth. It's one of those colours, it just goes with everything. It's super classy, it looks lovely with gold, it looks lovely with brass casters. It's great if you put browning wax on it. It looks really nice if you add white wax to it. It's just one of those colours, it's lovely. And that's a sort of a mid-taupey, brown, grey sort of colour. There's another colour in the Fresco range, which I have to say, a lot of people painted their kitchens during lockdown. And this was a very popular colour for doing that. It's called Cool Beans. And it's a soft, sort of slightly pinkish hue, sort of fawn colour. And it does look really stylish. So if you're a bit nervous about doing something super dark, don't be. But if you are,
I don't want it dark because it was dark, so I want it lighter.
well, it is dark because it is dark wood, but it's funny how if you paint something that was dark, but you painted something like this is a colour called After Midnight, this is a super on-trend colour, it is super stylish. It's absolutely gorgeous. You can totally transform dark furniture with a dark colour, but it will look completely different. But if you wanted to go lighter, there are some beautiful creams. Green is very in vogue at the moment, so there's some lovely colours of the greens, and that I thought was a very nice colour. It's called Little Duckle, and it's not really green, it's not really turquoise. It's not. It reminds me of something a bit like Starling's egg, something like that, and it's a really pretty fresh colour. So do feel free to come up and have a look or ask me any questions, and I kind of hope that maybe I've inspired you a little bit to maybe give it a go. Yes, yes.
The doors and whatever, actual cameras.
Both. Because the wall paints are